Hello and welcome to 24 panels per second. I forgot the name of the show there. I forgot what show I was doing. It's been so long since I've done this. I've actually forgotten the name of the show I was doing. Isn't that terrible? Welcome to the show, 24 panels per second. This is the comic book, movie, and TV show from the Comic Crush, coming back for our full season after our very truncated sorry, not full season, second season after our very truncated first season. It's so rough and ready tonight, guys. I'm really sorry. This is what we're doing tonight. Black Panther, Wakanda Forever. I'm your host, Paul. I'll be popping on in a minute with my co-host. I want to welcome you to tonight's show. Here I am. Hello. I hope you've all been well in the big break that we've had. In that time, we've done some new things for the Patreon. If you want to take a look now, you can get a new benefit for all tiers, which is money off in the web store. So you can get more comics, which I'm sure is the main reason that people go to the website, and I certainly hope it is. But I just wanted to let you know about that. This is our first show of 2023. We've taken a big break. I'm sort of in the middle of preparing new videos, new shows, new stuff coming all the time. So just keep your eyes peeled. It will take a bit of time, unfortunately, but I'd rather take some time and get something really good than sort of rush and get something terrible the way this show's going tonight. So, without further ado, for our Black Panther show, I'd like to welcome someone who always dresses in black. Elizabeth, how are you?
I'm swell. How are you?
Yeah, I hope you're doing better than I am tonight.
I mean, yeah, I think probably.
I'm all over the place.
Based on all evidence so far.
Well, I've only recorded, this is only the second show I've recorded in the last sort of 4 or 5 months, I think, because we did one show in Mike Mulcher, which will be up almost straight after this one goes up. And that's for I Am the Law, his new book, which is a really excellent new book on how Judge Dredd predicted British policing over the last 40 years. Definitely worth a read if you like to kind of look at the world beyond comics. We're going to go beyond comics tonight. We're going to look at Black Panther, which we didn't get to do when it first came out back in November. But, you know, we're doing now that it's on Disney Plus. It just dropped a few days ago, 1st of February. It arrived on Disney Plus. They're getting faster and faster now. The amount of time between the movie dropping at cinemas and then dropping on Disney Plus. Did you go and see this when it came out?
Of course I did.
Yeah.
Do you even have to ask?
I don't know. Maybe you shifted. Maybe you got burned by the Eternals.
I mean, yeah, I've stumbled over that hurdle now. It's all moving forward.
So I mean, like looking at Black Panther, a fantastic movie, and I think one of the kind of top tier Marvel movies, especially for me. I'm sure you felt the same way. It's been years since we did our show on that, so I can't really recall that.
Yeah. I mean, I think most Marvel fans would probably agree that it's one of the top tier films. You know, it was just and also, I think it even extended, beyond your typical Marvel audience for sure. Yeah. And I think it was a meaningful film to a lot of people, and it was a fantastic film.
Yeah, and certainly a pleasure to see a film that could do that, especially in this sort of genre. Now, obviously, the big issue here is the tragic passing of Chadwick Boseman, who played King T'Challa in the first movie. I'm sure we were all wondering at first, were they going to recast, which they were quite quick to say, no, we have no plans to recast this part. And they stuck to that. But also I mean, it never should be anyone's first concern when someone passes away, especially such a talent at such a young age. But fans were wondering, you know, how would the film cope with his passing? And we didn't know. I mean, right up until the first frame of the movie, we just didn't know how they would do it, because we knew it would probably have to be an off-screen death. And in fact, we didn't even know if they were going to say, yes, he's died in the film. You know, I mean, the first trailers kind of gave that away. Were you kind of happy with the way that the film dealt with his passing?
I think it was very smart for them to just handle it within the first 5 to 10 minutes of the film and just put it right out there, right out in front. And I think it was like a, you know, kind of a tasteful decision to not give you too much information about it. You know, I think that they didn't really want you to dwell. I think that having it be an illness kind of played into Shori's whole arc in the movie. It was something, you know, that she, because we'll get to this, but, you know, so much of the film is about her, you know, grappling with her anger and grief and vengeance, which is a theme that played out, you know, with T'Challa's whole story arc. And there's not really anyone that she can blame, you know, when his death was caused by an illness, you know, so she doesn't really know exactly where to channel her rage. And, you know, so I thought that was kind of a smart choice, because, you know, her anger is just all over the place, and she, you know, there's nobody that she can run out and, you know, exact vengeance upon, you know. So it kind of bottles up all the anger, and keeps her from really knowing where to direct it.
Yeah, and I thought it was quite interesting, because obviously the first person she can blame is herself, because she ultimately feels that she fails to reconstruct the heart-shaped herb that's sort of derived from vibranium, and therefore, which would have seemingly cured him instantly. And I thought it was interesting to kind of frame it in that, because that connects it back to Killmonger's actions in the first movie, which we do kind of address later on, and his sort of decision to destroy every kind of trace of the flower. And in fact, I felt that the whole film really mirrored a lot of the first movie in quite interesting ways, which hopefully we'll touch on as we go.
Yeah.
But yeah, nonetheless, you do feel it, and it is a tragic thing, and I give them props for handling it quite tastefully, and allowing a lot of that kind of real world grief, you know, because I think it took a lot of strength to allow a lot of the real world grief to bleed into the fictional world of the film. Right. And I because they could have just gone, oh, he's off world, or he's, you know, he's gone.
I don't know that they could have. I think that would have been a real mistake.
Yeah,
you know.
But they didn't do that. They kind of took the tough decision, and I really liked it because of that. And also, I mean, the cast must have been really feeling it, and a lot of, like, I read a lot of the articles in the lead up to the film and stuff, and it was literally all they talked about was, you know, honouring Chadwick Boseman and what his passing meant to them, and you know what the character meant to them. Yeah, so it's an interesting way and an interesting decision to make to even do a sequel, really. I'm glad they did.
Oh yeah. I mean, absolutely. I think you know, they could have chosen to just end it with the first film, but I think that would have been a missed opportunity because of how much the first film meant to people, how much that character means to not just the audience, but, you know, like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. You know, I think it's important to have a Black Panther in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah.
And I think that was one of the big questions, that again, right up until actually the last quarter of the film, um they never revealed who it was going to be, so it was still up in the air. Is there going to be a Black Panther in this film? Who is going to be the Black Panther in this film, if there is going to be a Black Panther?
Sorry.
Yeah, and I think I certainly had my money on it being Shuri, but they could have gone with other options.
Yeah, I thought, looking at the trailers and things, I thought it might have been Nakia. Like I thought they were going to go in that direction. I thought that would have been an interesting direction to go in. And to be honest with you, I felt that some of the kind of in real life controversy that Letitia Wright had seemed to have been involved in or generated,
sure.
Whichever way you want to look at it, might have led them to kind of go, hold on. And I thought, remember now in private conversations that you and I had said last year, you know what, I think looking at these trailers that they might kill Shuri as well. Like I genuinely thought they were gonna kind of, destroy the kind of royal family, and then build anew from that. But that's not what they did.
Right. I mean, to me, Shuri was the obvious choice. Yeah. Because she has the comics legacy as having been Black Panther. The character, I mean, and as you mentioned, of course there was the real life sort of controversies surrounding Letitia Wright, but prior to that, she had been this real fan favorite character. And I think she's still, I think waiting out, from the other side of this film having come out, I think that people do still really love her character. And I think it makes the most sense to have it be her.
Yeah, definitely. And she was great in the part. She's always been great in the part. And I never have a problem with her as an actor. I had a bit of an issue with some of the things that she kind of said on Twitter, but I think the subject matter that she was addressing at the time was a very touchy subject for a lot of people.
Right. And just in case anybody out there, if you have been living under a rock or something, it has to do with remaining unvaccinated. And that sort of thing. And to be perfectly honest, if that's her choice, it's not really my business. I understand that it's like a contentious topic, and but people do have the right to choose for themselves what they want to do. So as just a viewer of the film and a fan of the character, I really enjoy her performance as Shuri. I was hoping that she was going to be the new Black Panther, and that's how it's worked out.
But it was also good that they kept that until the very last chunk of the film, and there is this constant refrain of there isn't going to be a Black Panther anymore. Like, this is it. We're just going to have to survive in this new world that isn't about that. And I again, it's a choice I commend them for, because that keeping your sort of star hero off, out of play for that long is a brave choice to make. But it does have resonance with what the character was going through and the choices that she's having to make, and how she's going to approach her life and the problems that the film presents it with. Obviously, we get a lot more for Angela Bassett to do in this. She's now been nominated for I believe it's Best Supporting Actress Oscar.
Oh, fantastic!
Off the back of this, and there are certainly a lot of people rooting for her to win, which would be fantastic. She's an amazing actress with an incredible kind of career behind her, and was fantastic in the film. And she kind of takes a much more central role in this, which is really kind of interesting to see her do. and it's a lot of her. I mean, although she counsels Shuri not to grieve as much, or to begin the kind of ending of the grieving process in the film, it's her grief and her anger that drives a lot of the stuff in the movie, and particularly in one way creates a very, very fateful situation. You know, when she sends Nakia to retrieve Shuri from Talokan, and I feel that was. It's kind of fantastic that they kind of pushed her to the forefront in this, and it does show you what happens when you're not thinking clearly, when you're not kind of, you know, when you're in the throes of grief or throes of big emotions. You don't always think clearly. You do sometimes do stupid things.
Yeah, which is a big theme throughout the film. You know, it applies to so many different characters.
And of course, the grief in itself is not just the personal, or the singular personal loss of a loved one. It's the grief of a nation. I mean, I was thinking this in a lot of the sequences, particularly in that amazing sequence where they kind of still tell the story of Talokan through Namor's remembrances. If you listen to the music there, the music is screaming, and it is a scream of an entire race. And it is like, you know, it's this kind of rage, which is something I think, you know, people of color can probably appreciate a lot. You know, people who are sort of Mesoamerican, you know, I think it's something that really kind of hits exactly the right spot in terms of encompassing that stuff. And again, as with Killmonger, you don't always agree. You can kind of agree with the point, but not the action taken. Do you know what I mean? Like it's you can definitely say, yeah, you've got a point. And again, it's another way in which this becomes an echo of the first movie.
Yes. Yeah, again, you've got like a really charismatic villain who you can empathize with, you know, and actually say, you know, on one level, you're kind of right. And I kind of agree with you. But, you know, as you just said, it's like, oh, but you're going about it all the wrong way.
Yeah. And I wouldn't even say, I mean, it is tough to make an argument for him as an out and out villain in this. I think with Killmonger, it was a little bit clearer, just because I think his path was demonstrably so destructive so early on, whereas I think with Namor, there's more of a lingering threat of, look, if you don't start seeing things my way, I'm going to do this. And he really doesn't until the end of the film, whereas Killmonger straight away was right, bang, let's arm people, let's incite revolution. So I felt a little bit more compassion for
right. Well, I think like Namor as a character, if you're familiar with him as a comics character, he is that character who, you know, well, he's not really a villain, but he's not really a hero, and he kind of just treads that line, and you never really know whether to trust him or not, but you do know that, you know, he's always gonna, you know, sort of do what he feels is, you know, sort of in his best interest and the best interest of his nation, and you know, and he can be quite ruthless about that. So you know, so yeah, I think that they set him up really well to reflect his like comics counterpart, you know, as a character who, like, okay, well, you know, sometimes you could see him working, you know, alongside the Avengers or alongside the X-Men. But at the end of the day, he'll still always walk off his own way, you know, especially if they're, you know, if their sort of decisions don't align with what he wants to do.
Yeah. I'd agree with that. I think he's like just a fascinating character as portrayed in the film. I mean, he's an interesting character anyway. You know, in the comics, I haven't read a lot of the modern iterations of Namor.
He
They
pops up in a lot of Fantastic Four. He pops up in
Mm.
a lot of X-Men. In this film, they establish right away that he's a mutant,
Yeah.
and that he's unlike, the other, sort of members of his nation.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, his
Palakini, I think
people.
yeah.
Right. Which is why he has, the little winged feet, and the pointy ears, and all of that.
Yeah.
So it's just another little tick in the sort of like we're working toward the X-Men box.
But interestingly enough, they're not without powers. His people aren't without powers. I mean, they're all kind of incredibly strong, incredibly agile, seemingly bulletproof. I never kind of really got to the bottom of that, at least in looking at the film. They also have this amazing kind of siren call ability, which we see in full effect in probably what was one of the best sequences of the film, which is very early on. You get that kind of attack out at sea where they're trying to stop the military from retrieving a vibranium detection device. And that was an incredible sequence. The siren call was a very bewitching bit, and I've been listening to it a lot on the soundtrack album, and it's just an incredible bit of music. But that was one of my favorite sequences. Just amazing. And plus, you get Lake Bell and Robert John Burke.
Yes. Yeah, I know. Like, you have Lake Bell in the movie, and then you kill her off in 5 minutes. Like, come on.
Yeah, I know. I can't believe, but it was great that for that 5 minutes, she was part of the MCU. And Robert John Burke, who once played RoboCop. He's a terrific actor. That guy. He's turned up in like hundreds of different films and movies, and is just an incredible actor. But there's something that kind of struck me with this. Sorry, kind of disappeared there.
Yeah, I know. I was gonna say.
It's because I'm looking at notes. I kind of drifted over. No one's going to be upset if my face disappears off this thing. Nothing's working tonight. Look, my little pop shield is going everywhere. Look, the intro was bad.
Complete
It's
shambles.
a shambles for the first show of the new year. This is appalling. So yeah, I mean, with the I think M'Baku puts his kind of finger on it when he says, "Look, they call him Kukulkan. He is the winged serpent god. They've got this mastery over the sea, to a certain degree over the air. They're incredibly strong. This siren power they've got, they're actually closer for me to Asgardians than they are to
humans
or Wakandans, because their power, I mean, as with the Wakandans, actually, their power comes from this sort of, you could impart a divine origin on them, in that the Wakandans and the Talakini get their powers from the stars.
Well, the Wakandans don't actually have powers. Like, they have the vibranium.
Yeah.
But they don't,
or they've used it for science, yeah. Whereas these guys have kind of imbibed it in this very pure way, and it's they're more like gods, or more like kind of very powered individuals, or mutants, if we want to go there. And I just thought about that, and it's just like, yeah, I think, somewhere in there's something more to be explored with that race, and obviously the film didn't have room to get there. It was a long film, it was like, I think it's 2 hours.
It was like,
minutes?
It was about 3. It was close to 3 hours. Which actually I do want to mention, because
please.
So I've watched this film twice, and I have to say, when I saw it at the cinema, and I watched it all in one go, I didn't like it as much as when I watched it on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
I liked it,
Okay.
but I think I enjoyed it a lot more on the rewatch because I kind of paused it in the middle. Got to go like have a little break, make a cup of tea, all that stuff. I just think I ingested a lot of the nuances of it better the second time. And I don't know if it's because it was a rewatch or if it was because like, yeah, it's a really long film. There's a lot to take in. And I mean, yeah, I don't know how you felt about that.
Yeah, I don't know. I had some issues with I went to see it at the cinema sort of opening day, but I did have some issues, unfortunately, with the projection and lighting, as I always do at suburban cinemas. And so I had to leave a couple of times to discuss with them the quality of the lighting in the cinema and why they felt it, needed to be so bright. So much so that I couldn't see, people of color at night on screen. Like it was just stupid, and it was
The
just
lighting was
washing
just
out.
really
Yeah, the
bad,
lighting was too bright, and I really kind of did try and take this task to it of it and just say, look, this isn't acceptable in this type of movie, or in any movie really, but because you can't see the faces properly. And I want to be able to see these people's faces, and I want to be able to see, hear what they're saying properly. And I can't concentrate on this movie because I'm not getting the detail. Anyway, it was a whole big thing.
I didn't have any of that kind of issue,
No.
but it was literally just, I mean, and like I sat through Avengers Endgame like, about 5 times in the cinema. It's like long movies aren't the problem, but I think it was just the type of film it is, like the tone of the film,
it's a lot.
Yeah, it's a somber, it's a heavy film at times. And it just I don't know. For me, breaking it up into like sort of 2 like little viewings actually worked better for me.
Right.
At least on the rewatch, I was, I felt like I really, sort of picked up on more.
At the end of this discussion, Liz, we'll come back to this point because I'm going to say something that will surprise you about rewatching certain Marvel movies. And
all right.
But yeah, I totally get what you mean. And in fact, I feel the film could have actually done with a little more runtime to push out certain areas.
Apparently it was like I think they had like a 5-hour film that they had to whittle down.
Yeah. I mean, I can well believe it. And I wish now that there was more room to add in more for the home audience, because I think that medium is different from the medium with which we first saw the film, and therefore it should be treated as a different medium and kind of, put in more, make it a little kind of mini series, do something with it, because it is a very rich world.
Yeah, I think I think a lot of the stuff that went onto the cutting room floor was like scenes between Shuri and Riri, which we haven't even touched on Riri yet.
Yeah, well, I mean, I liked her presence in the film. I thought she was a kind of interesting, not counterpoint to Tony Stark. I mean, like having her in the movie is great. I'm looking forward to the series when that hits, because we're going to get an Ironheart series and Armor Wars. I don't know if she features in Armor Wars though. Do you?
I imagine she probably will. I mean, I think that series is going to be more of a War Machine film or series rather, but I'm sure that they would include her.
Yeah. And I can kind of see her taking Tony's mantle, because she's got a lot of his kind of cocky arrogance, or the same cocky arrogance that's in that character rather. And his financial kind of noose as well, because you see her bidding up her kind of price on doing someone's own work for her.
Yeah, she's so I could one thing I thought that maybe like was some of the cut scenes and stuff was I was surprised by how little reference to Iron Man there was. I think there was one comment in which like a guard is like, oh, she has an Iron Man suit, but that was all the mention of it. there was nothing else. There was no like, oh, no passing remark from her about, oh, I was inspired by Tony Stark or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I thought that was kind of,
But do you think that's kind of a conscious move post Endgame, post Far From Home, and those other things to get away from that a bit? Because we've had a fair amount of that,
I mean, it
right?
just to me, I would have liked a line like that, because it's like she's wearing an Iron Man suit. To me, that's kind of an elephant in the room that could have used more addressing. Because it's like, okay, yeah, I think for me, and a lot of people, I think it's like, oh, okay, so there's this girl dressed as Iron Man. Why is she dressed as Iron Man? What's going on? Like, I mean, Iron Man, as far as like, his whole arc throughout phase 1, such an important character. And to kind of just not address it at all upon the introduction of, who is potentially his kind of successor. I thought I would have just liked a line.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I was kind of satisfied with it as it was. I feel there was enough in there.
Not also, to dwell on it, but just like a nod of acknowledgement.
But I think someone asks, is her technology Stark Tech at one point when they're... I mean, that was the other thing that kind of reminded me of Tony's character. She seems happiest when she's tinkering around in a dirty garage rather than kind of any kind of ultra clean lab. And I feel that was the nod. That was the kind of through line from Tony to her.
I mean, we'll get it in the Ironheart series. I'm sure we will, but I mean, I don't think we'll get anything. It's just like a minor nitpick, really, but
I don't think we'll get anything like we did in the comics, where it's a very direct conduit from Tony to her.
I would love that, though.
Yeah,
I mean, if they want to have hologram Downey Jr., I would be super into it.
I don't know that he's all that keen to come back. He's always said that the door is open, but he's not sure that he wants to be kind of
Tony Stark forever. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. And I don't blame him. It's kind of a big mantle to live with. Also, you do have this thing with the kind of technology of the Wakandans and stuff like that, where it almost becomes sort of magitech, which I kind of really rail against. And I had a real problem with him in Infinity War, where it was just like, okay, look, it's too much now. Like,
oh, I never have a problem with it. It's, like to me, it's just like, it's comics. It's comics. Who cares? Like,
yeah. And you know what? You're absolutely right. I think in the context of the wider thing, you're absolutely right. In the context of sitting there watching it, no. It's just like, this is
never bothers me.
But yeah, I kind of liked a lot of Riri stuff, and I feel she served a valuable kind of purpose within the plot. Because I mean, who else would it have been? It was interesting though. They very few people refer to her by her name. She's just constantly referred to as the scientist, and I know she wasn't a late addition to the plot, but I almost kind of wonder. It's almost like they shot a lot of that stuff, way apart, to leave the door open. Like, oh, maybe it's not going to be Riri, and we're going to inject, someone else into this role.
Right.
And that it's so weird, because it, in a way, I guess it kind of dehumanizes her. Which annoyed me.
Which I think from Namor's perspective, he doesn't care what her name is or anything like that. Like, he's the one who primarily refers to her as the scientist. And I think that it was like, I think, in the earlier stage of, when they kind of make mention of her, it's kind of, so it's like a little bit of a surprise when you see that it's Riri, and, if you didn't kind of know, it's like, oh, you're talking about this 19-year-old girl. It's how, when you think of like the scientist, you're probably not thinking of a 19-year-old girl.
Yeah. I think that was interesting. But I mean, also it almost does Namor's character a disservice, because really, if he was as deadly serious as he proclaims to be throughout the movie, he would have just killed her straight away. As soon as
Yes,
they got back to
that is
Talokan, they would have just slit her throat, and that would have been it.
yes.
And in fact, I mean, not that you wanted to see that to happen to that character,
right?
But that would have taken it up a notch. Like that would have really kind of ramped up the sort of tension. However, I can see why they didn't. You know.
Well, see, here's like, you know, because I had that same feeling throughout, you know, like that whole scene when Shuri's under, you know, like, you know, under the sea, seeing, you know, Namor's kingdom and all of that. My feeling is that Okoye should have just gotten away with just Riri. Like Riri just didn't need to be there in those scenes. She should have like somehow escaped. You know, Okoye managed to, you know, get her out of there, and it should have just been Shuri going down there, because that would have just negated the whole thing of like, well, why is he letting Riri live? And it just didn't make any sense. I mean, if you were going to argue that it did make some kind of sense, it would have been that he didn't want to alienate Shuri, because obviously what he really wanted from Shuri was an alliance. And if he had just flat out killed Riri without Shuri's sort of blessing, it would have, you know, sort of nipped that in the bud. So I think that's the, you know, the way to kind of logic it out.
Yeah,
but I still think she just shouldn't have been there. I think it just made a lot less sense to have them both go down there.
In a way, she could have been, if you want, like the movie's MacGuffin, and everything could have been about
protecting
getting to her or finding her, or
well, yeah, if Okoye had just like managed to swoop off with her, take her to Wakanda, and like, you know, Shuri got left behind,
or even if you cut that whole chunk where they go get her at the beginning, and move a lot of that stuff towards the end, where the end becomes about introduced, because that's what Marvel movies do, is they tend to hand off the storyline to these other characters, so you get a taste of who those characters are before they get their own series or their own movies or what have you. And I think that's always been a feature of Marvel. And you know, making the MacGuffin a person is kind of a nice move as well. But overall, I felt kind of quite happy with what they did and the way they did it. The only thing I've got to say, you know, I'm sure we got other stuff to talk about within the movie, but the only thing I wasn't happy about was the kind of whole fight sequence on the boat, which I just thought was.
I don't know. Everybody complains about like the big, you know, end fight sequences. I didn't have a problem with it. I mean, you know, what did you want? I mean, you know, it's gonna be, you know, sea dwellers versus land dwellers on a boat.
Yeah, I mean,
what did you want?
It was a lot better looking at it at home than it was looking at it on a big screen. I gotta say that. It didn't look like everyone was standing in front of a photograph of the ocean. But yeah, ultimately, I wasn't very sort of enthralled by that. I felt a lot of as with a lot of Marvel stuff, the better stuff had happened earlier on.
Yeah, but it needs to happen for the, you know, film to have that, you know, the big confrontation. You know, it's part of the film.
But actually,
and if you didn't get it, you probably would complain about that instead.
Well, I don't know. I mean, for me, the big confrontation was the one happening on the beach with.
Well, yeah, of course. Yeah. That's the one that you're invested in, and the other stuff is just like, okay, you know, all this, you know, peril is happening in the background. So.
But I think I would have liked to have seen it where, you know, the Wakandans just get their asses kicked, as happens in the movie, and then they're too kind of nervous about going back out there, and it's just Shuri on her own that does it. I guess I would have liked to have
well,
seen that.
I see, for plot reasons, I think that it's important to have the big confrontation between the two nations, because you know, when Shuri and Namor have their confrontation, you know, what ultimately leads to their, you know, sort of truce is that neither one wants to see their people, you know, at war.
Sure.
And you know, having the literal representation of their people at war behind them works better.
Yeah, I get it. I'm not not unaccustomed to this stuff, but I'm just, you know, but you know, as a kind of the flip side to that is you get some great sequences up the top of the movie. The kind of UN sequence intercut with the kind of attempted robbery of the vibranium was fantastically done.
That was great.
And you get that really beautiful image of Dene Garai stepping out of the shadows, like, which was a fantastic kind of with the music and everything. I think
funny you should mention those scenes, because I read you know, like a little bit of an interview with Ryan Coogler where he said that they tried, that was some of the scenes that they were actually going to drop from the film. Wow, and then when he rewatched it, he was like, if we didn't have those scenes, this would be the worst movie ever, in his words. Because I actually think that he's totally right. Those scenes are super important to the film, and so great, you know, that I really don't think the film would have worked anywhere near as well without them.
I think the problem with it is that it can't decide what's more important. Is it the quest? I mean, effectively, you could say the quest for vibranium and the quest for Riri are the same thing, but they're not, and it can't decide what's more important, because it's also juggling with, you know. And actually, funny enough, it reminded me of Aquaman, where they did this entire film about them all getting to a meeting to decide if they were going to go to war, rather than just going to war or not going. And it was just like, look, this is freaking pointless. And this is what this film is a bunch of people trying to decide effectively if they're going to join up together and go to war. And it's just like, look, I feel that you've got too many things you're trying to get to, and they should have found a better way to kind of unite those points or drop one. And I feel like
so wait,
the quest for vibranium is too kind of old hat, because we did that in the first one.
Okay, well, vibranium is still, like, you know, like the greatest resource on Earth.
Absolutely.
And as it turns out, Wakanda's not the only place that has vibranium.
No.
And you know what this film, you know, sort of does differently is show, you know, Namor, you know, as the other nation, you know, leader of the other nation that has vibranium, has a totally different, you know, idea of how to approach, you know, anybody, you know, encroaching on his stock of vibranium, which is to just go to war with the entire world.
But I don't know. I had some issues with that, but they're such minor issues, it doesn't really matter, because ultimately I really enjoyed the freaking movie, and I feel it was a kind of worthy successor to that first film. Ultimately,
yeah, I would agree. You know, and I have to say, the first time I watched it, you know, it wasn't that I didn't like it. I liked it a lot, but like, I think I had more, like, sort of reservations about certain things. Like, for example, you know, there were certain things that, you know, first time around, you know, I didn't really, you know, I thought the Midnight Angels were really silly, and I was like, why did they do that? And you know, some of the jokes, you know, hit me the wrong way. Whereas on the second viewing, I was like, oh, I don't know why that didn't work for me. You know, maybe it was just, you know,
I mean, for me, I liked a lot of the humor, but then I usually do.
And it's not like a you know, really jokey film by any stretch, you know, compared to it's obviously the overall tone is still about, you know, and the themes are still about grief, and you know, there's a lot of
yeah, absolutely,
you know, kind of heavy stuff going on in it.
I felt that, like, in terms of some of the sort of more kind of humorous stuff, Winston Duke was a real standout this time around.
Yeah, as he was in the first movie, to be honest.
But I think he was given a lot more to do here, and a lot more kind of to play with. And I love the humor that came from his outlook on the rest of Wakanda, or at least how the kind of, you know, real civilized version of Wakanda works. I feel we kind of did miss, although it would have been one conflict too many to kind of have. Oh Christ, what's the name of the actor that's not in this one? Daniel Kaluuya. Like, I think it would have been one conflict too many to have anything between him and Okoye in this.
Yeah,
although I did
don't
miss him being in the film.
He's a great actor, but I actually think it was better to just leave him out of it entirely.
Yeah.
And here's the other thing that I want to make sure we kind of touch on briefly.
Please.
You know, when you mention Okoye, we've talked about Riri, we've talked about Nakia a little bit. We'll talk about her more before the end. And we've talked about Queen Ramonda. It's like a really female centric film, like, you know, like
completely.
You know, I mean, like so much of it is like, you know, kind of just female led, like, you know, and you have just, you know, the you know, sort of backup of Martin Freeman as Everett Ross, you have M'Baku, but really it's like the women who, you know, this story's about.
They make the crucial decisions in the film, and it's not just a feminine story in that way. You know, Namor is grieving the loss of his mother still, and you know, it's you know, it's my mother's land and all this. It's it's there in the spirit of the film, even if it wasn't in the text, and it's just everywhere, and I think it's better for that, as you say.
Yeah, I love that.
And also we have a new character of Anika, played by Michaela Cole, who was a nice little addition. Doesn't get a massive amount of scenes, although she's in the film quite a lot.
I love that they're like building on the Dora Milaje, because you know, now we know, like, you know, like we know Okoye, we know Ao, and now we know Anika, and it's like, you know, rather than them just be these sort of, you know, strong female warriors, it's like you start to see them, you know, as individuals, like, you know, which in the first film, you know, you kind of there was only a little bit of that. They only really kind of characterized Okoye just due to you know, sort of the, you know, sort of expanse of what they had to already deal with. But I like that they are slowly kind of like giving you more of the Dora Milaje. I love the Dora Milaje. I think it's really cool.
And you know, you see that Anika has a female partner, which is kind of another interesting touchstone, because I mean, am I wrong? Am I right? Like, gay relationships haven't really featured heavily in the Marvel universe.
Not enough yet, but I do think that, like, you know, they're moving in that direction.
Yeah, sure.
Which, you know, is great, and I'm sure we're going to see more and more of that.
And it's certainly something I welcome in the film, and you know, welcome seeing more of, and I hope they find more room for that. But as you say, you know, it's lovely to see returning characters as well, Everett Ross, and of course
Val,
who, interesting duality in this film, because we see a kind of side to her that's a bit more compassionate, a bit more caring,
sort of.
That quickly kind of gets shut down.
Right. She's a really interesting character. She's like kind of a wild card. You don't know exactly, you know, okay, like, you know, is she good? Is she bad? Like, we don't really know yet. But I'm really enjoying her featuring more and more.
Definitely. I felt overall like it was interesting to see in the film a nation that comes from the same wellspring as Wakanda, but is not technologically advanced. because the Talakini aren't technologically advanced. Their advancements come entirely from community and from using what's around them, and they literally from the water. So I thought overall that was interesting. Another interesting facet of the film is this idea.
And I would argue that they are in fact technologically advanced.
Do you think so?
Not in the same way as Wakanda.
No, not in the same. Yeah, but I mean,
when you look at they've got their own technology that seems to work for them. More of it is like naturally derived, as you say.
That's
But he still built essentially like a sun underneath the ocean, and you can look at the city itself and see that it's like, oh, okay, they've clearly they've got their own form of technology down here.
I've got a feeling, given where the film left it, I know there's still some areas we haven't covered, which we will cover, which are kind of interesting. But given where they left the film, or left Namor at the film, I've got a feeling he's going to be ousted the next time we see him, and he might become an outcast, because I think there's a lingering, overwhelming disappointment in Namora. Played by Mabel. I hope I'm getting this right. Kendria. I think I'm mispronouncing that. But I think there's a lingering kind of disappointment and anger in her about his choices.
Right.
Because
I could see that happening, because she seems to have a different perspective. She seems far more like what's the word I was looking for? She seems more willing to just go straight to war. She doesn't seem as methodical, I guess, or whereas he seems to you got the idea that he's playing a long game, by the end. The way things are left, he's like, wow, the Wakandans are now, essentially our allies, and when war does come from the surface world, we'll have them as an ally. So I would agree, she seems angrier than him. She seems more sort of bullheaded. So
I think that there's a lot of room for that to play out in other places, and more interestingly, it is a film though about legacy and about picking up mantles, whether it's the mantle of Iron Man with Riri, if we want to say that's going to happen, or the mantle of the Black Panther from T'Challa to Shuri. But of course, in terms of legacy, there's another character we haven't really discussed, which is Nakia, and a very important plot point with her, right? I mean,
how did you feel about that?
Okay, so I feel, in terms of the audience, that scene was more about Shuri than about the kid, or about Nakia, or even about T'Challa. I think that was designed to give Shuri a kind of reassuring pat on the back, and say, "Oh, there, it's all okay," because he lives on. Be another, But I also feel that's important for the audience, and I feel that that's important for the very specific audience that loves Black Panther, and all the people that were moved by it, and I feel that it's a wise move, and it's an interesting move. I mean, I don't know what their hope is, whether or not we're going to, I'd like to see more of Shuri now as Black Panther.
Oh,
I don't necessarily want to jump 15 years in the future where, like a 20-year-old Toussaint is taking the mantle. I would like to see stories like that in time, but I don't want to jump ahead straight away.
Right.
So I hope it's not their way of kind of going, just in case there's too much backlash, as Shuri is Black Panther, don't worry, we're going to put this kid in. Like, I don't want like
I think it works on both
yeah,
levels. It sets him up as a potential, maybe one day we could see stories with him, or
yeah,
we just the knowledge that we could, or that there will be T'Challa Black Panther in the MCU one day. And but I agree that it was kind of catharsis for Shuri and for the
yeah,
audience, which was nice, and I really liked the way this film kind of dealt with grief. I actually thought it was really, really well done. I think that that final scene with Shuri on the beach, finally, burning the funeral clothes, was a really lovely scene. And it got me choked up watching it. Like, when you see those flashbacks of Chadwick Boseman, and their sibling relationship in the films,
yeah.
it was really touching to me. It was like, it did well me up, because you see the actor's face, and and how much you kind of loved him in that role, but you also see, like, the way you yourself, after you have dealt with your sort of anger and all of that stuff at losing someone, you can start to remember the good things about them, and the nice moments that you had together, and and look at that, without feeling angry, you can feel happy again and have nice memories. So that's I felt like what the point that she reached by the end of the film.
And I feel the film kind of goes through the 5 stages of grief in those characters.
Denial, all like, I think you're right.
And I feel that you get that spread across different characters in the movie. Yeah, I mean, overall, I really enjoyed it. I'm trying to think, is it the best film of that phase? I don't know.
I don't know.
I'm kind of in.
I think it stands out for what it does. I think that, but like, I think the argument can be made for other films in different ways. But I think with all that it had to accomplish, I think it did so really well.
I mean, yeah, it just a terrific movie, and again, one of the standout MCU films. I mean, I've watched it 3 times now, so I think it'll probably be a little while before I go back to it again. But yeah, certainly one I'll enjoy revisiting, as I've enjoyed revisiting the first Black Panther many times. Yeah, overall very good. Now, I did promise you that we would go back to the point about rewatching the films at home earlier on, Liz. So I can tell you that just the other day I sat and rewatched, or watched for the first time, depending on which way you look at it, No Way Home. But I watched the longer version.
Oh, I haven't watched the longer version yet.
Right, so the longer version is only longer by about 8 minutes.
Okay.
And is now playing over here on Now TV or Sky. And you know what? I enjoyed the film so much more than I did when I first watched it. I still think
additional footage, or was it just the fact that it's a really good movie and you just
this and that, yeah, a really good movie though. I think we can really sit and make arguments all day long about what a good movie actually is. You will of course lose that argument.
I will of course win that argument,
but I preferred this experience of watching it than the first experience. Some of that running time is taken up with a little intro between the Spider-Mans at the beginning, where Tom Holland and Tobey Maguire finally tell Andrew Garfield that they do indeed love him. A lot of it is comedic throwaway stuff.
Right.
that sort of pads the movie out. But I think in padding the movie out, there is a kind of bit more room to breathe. I still think it was far too fan servicey. But the experience this time was a lot better. I mean, my gripes with it still are my gripes. They're not gonna change. But this was a much better experience, and I really kind of enjoyed it. On the flip side to that, I also rewatched The Eternals.
Okay, go on.
Which I did enjoy more. Okay. However, it still feels like a film apart from the MCU. Do you know what I mean? Like, it doesn't feel like part of it at all. And I think that's kind of the nature of some of the stuff that we discussed way back when we did The Eternals, one of these. But interestingly enough, I was watching the kind of making of The Eternals. They do those 1 hour kind of making of things now, the Marvel Universe Assembled or whatever they're called.
Yeah.
And literally, it's full of people going, "This is going to change the MCU. This is going to change the way you look at the MCU. This is going to change the MCU forever." And it's just like, you know what? It'd be an interesting experiment to go back and look at all the interviews for this stuff, for all of them, for all the movies, all 20 or 25, 30 movies, and count up the number of times that someone says, "This is going to change the MCU," or "This is going to change the way you look at the MCU," and then do a sort of analysis of how often it actually changed the MCU. Because there's a lot of backlash at the moment about people not mentioning the fact that there's a fucking great big celestial sticking up through the through the earth. No one's mentioned it.
No, I mean,
and I'm sure there'll be an article on CBR or comicbook.com or some other bloody website going, "Oh, this is why no one's," and there'll be some convoluted reason that actually really won't make sense. Right. But I just found it really amusing to sit there and kind of listen to them go, "This will change the MCU, change the MCU." Again, though, what you do get from watching those things is there is a lot of work and a lot of effort that goes into these things. And I think with a few tweaks, it could have been a much better movie and a much more interesting one. But yeah, loved this movie. Quite enjoyed watching No Way Home again. I have rewatched Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I still think that's probably the tippy top for me.
Really, I think No Way Home is for me.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. Yeah. That's fair. You're wrong, but it's okay.
No, I'm right. I mean,
no. It's fine. It's fine.
It is the best.
Whatever works for you,
and it does.
Even though you're drastically incorrect.
Change the MCU.
Actually, yes, you're right. You're right. It does. It does change. As I feel did Doctor Strange.
Doctor Strange. Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what they do with this stuff going ahead. We're going to get more multiverse stuff, I'm sure. Although they might be done with it. They might just go, nah, done with it now, moving on to phase 5, and which starts in just a couple of weeks, I think. We've got Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania coming. I'll certainly be back reviewing that. Hopefully Liz will join me for that. And we'll be discussing that. Obviously, we won't leave it a full 4 or 5 months before we get to that one this time. Yes, we are aware there are a bunch of shows and things we missed in our sort of downtime. But maybe we'll get to those. Keep an eye on the Patreon. As I said, you can join the Patreon. That helps me out tremendously in doing these things. It's pretty much the only way I can keep it going, that along with the web store, because it does cost money to do all this stuff. Do check out the new stuff on the Patreon. For those of you who are kind of into articles and stuff, I try and put a lot of stuff up ahead of time on there, and we're trying to get more and more done way ahead of time, so I can get it on there first. So you get a first glimpse of that. You get money off on the web store. There is the pull list, which is my picks of all the comics that are coming out every couple of months. I do a complete list, doing sort of 2 or 3 months worth of comics. Looking way ahead and kind of picking out what I think you guys should be reading and certainly should be taking a look at. Plus, if you pick the third sort of top tier, there is a you get a comics mail out every few months. I will send you a first issue of a comic of a series that I think you should be reading. Do check that out. All available on there. You can join and subscribe from as little as £2. I'd be very grateful if you did that. You know, times are tough, as I'm sure everyone's experiencing. And if you can afford it, I'd appreciate your help there. Guys, it's been great being back doing this. Liz, it's been lovely to see you. Thank you so much for coming on again. It's been so long since we've done this. As I said, I've clearly forgotten how to do it. But hopefully the next one will go a bit smoother.
Nice to be back in the saddle.
Yeah, such as it is. Yeah. And look out for the Mike Moultrie interview. That's coming soon. Thanks very much. I have been Paul. That has been Liz. Bye, Liz.
Bye.
We'll see you soon.